Chapter 1. The Echo of Silence. The child labor auction in Port Alaron was breathing its last, foul breath when rancher Elias Thorne saw her. The air in the warehouse was a thick, suffocating blanket woven from sawdust, desperation, and the faint, sour smell of unwashed bodies. Elias stood at the back, a statue carved from solitude, his weathered hands worrying the brim of his hat as he watched the grim parade of children sold like livestock. The year 1887 had been a cruel one for the Republic of Caldera, and the land, cracked and thirsty, offered no solace. Families, broken by drought and debt, were making impossible choices. At 42, Elias Thorne commanded one of the largest cattle ranches in Serenity Valley, a sprawling kingdom of grass and sky. Yet his prosperity was a hollow echo in the vast, silent rooms of his home. His wife, Elara, had prayed for children for 15 long years. Each year that passed without the cry of a newborn carved a new, deeper line of sorrow into her face and his soul. The ranch hands spoke in whispers he was meant to overhear. What good is a king without an heir? The auctioneer's voice, grating and mercenary, sliced through his reverie. Next, a girl, age 14, healthy and strong, been in the cotton field since she was 8, good with animals, can read and write some. Elias looked up. A thin girl was nudged onto the makeshift platform. Her brown hair, a tangled river of neglect, framed a face that might have been beautiful if not for the gaunt hollows of her cheeks and the bruised purple shadows beneath her eyes. Her dress was a ghost of a garment, patched until its original color was a distant memory. But it was her eyes that snared him. They were not the vacant, defeated pools he had seen in the other children. These eyes were alive, burning with a fierce, calculating fire. They darted around the room, not with fear, but with assessment, measuring every exit, every face, every shadow. In them he saw a will to survive that reminded him painfully of himself as a young man, fighting to carve a life from this unforgiving land. "Bidding starts at $20, the auctioneer boomed. "25, called a man near the front. Elias recognized him, Silas Croft, a farmer known for the short, brutal lives of his hired hands. 30, came another voice. Before a conscious thought could form, Elias found his own voice, solid and clear, cutting through the murmurs. $50. The warehouse fell into a sudden, profound silence. $50 was an astronomical sum, more than 2 years' wages for such work. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with a predator's delight. $50 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 60? The silence stretched, thick and heavy. No one was foolish enough to challenge Elias Thorne when that tone entered his voice. Sold to Mr. Thorne for $50. As Elias moved toward the front to finalize the transaction, he met the girl's gaze. He had expected to see fear, or perhaps a flicker of relief. Instead, what he saw froze him in his tracks. It was pity. This child, sold and bought like a sack of grain, was looking at him, a man of wealth and power, with an expression of profound, unnerving pity. The auctioneer handed him a slip of paper. "Name's Elina Vance," he grunted. "Parents took the fever last winter, been on her own since. You got a good one, Mr. Thorne." Elias Thorne folded the paper, the cheap ink smudging against his thumb. He approached the girl. Up close he could see the delicate tremor in her hands, the only betrayal of the terror she must be feeling. Her wrists were fragile as a bird's wing. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice softer than he intended, touching the brim of his hat. "I'm Elias Thorne. You'll be coming to my ranch." She studied his face for a long, silent moment, her gaze so intense it felt as if she were reading the history of his life in the lines around his eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was a low, clear whisper. "What kind of work?" "General help, around the house, the grounds. My wife, Elara, will show you your duties." "And if I don't want to come?" The question startled him with its quiet defiance. "You have a choice," he said, meeting her gaze. "But winter is a hungry wolf in Port Alaron, and the streets have sharp teeth for a young woman alone." Elina's eyes swept the room one last time, at the remaining children, their faces pale and blank, at the greedy men counting their coins. When her gaze returned to him, a subtle shift had occurred, a shutter closing over the fire. "I reckon I'll come with you then, Mr. Thorne." Chapter 2. The Weight of Kindness. The journey to the Thorne Ranch was a long, dusty affair that consumed the remainder of the day. Elias had loaded his wagon with supplies, and Elina sat beside him on the bench, a small, silent figure against the vast, rolling landscape of the Eastern Territories. She didn't speak, but her silence was not passive. Elias felt her awareness as a palpable presence. He watched her from the corner of his eye, noticing how she catalogued everything: the way he managed the team of horses, the unique shapes of the rock formations they passed, the slow, deliberate descent of the sun. She was not merely a passenger, she was mapping this new world, etching every detail into her memory. "Are you planning a departure?" he asked, his voice casual, after several hours had passed in this charged silence. "Depends," she replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She finally turned to look at him, her eyes as old as the hills they traveled through. "On whether you bought me for my labor or for other reasons?" The steel in her soft voice coiled in Elias's gut. He pulled the wagon to a stop. The sudden stillness amplified the chirr of insects in the tall grass. He turned on the seat to face her fully. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I want to be perfectly clear. You are coming to my ranch to perform honest work, cooking, cleaning, tending the gardens, nothing more. Any man who would lay a hand on a child deserves the shortest rope from the highest tree, and I count myself in that judgment." She held his gaze, searching his face with that unnerving maturity. It was a long moment before she gave a single, slow nod. "All right, then." They rode on, but the silence between them had changed. The tension had eased, replaced by a fragile, unspoken truce. As the sun bled across the western sky in hues of orange and violet, they crested a final hill. Below them, the Thorne Ranch sprawled across the valley, like a small, self-contained kingdom. The main house, built of sturdy, dark timber, had a wide, welcoming porch and windows that glinted like friendly eyes in the fading light. A massive barn stood sentinel to one side, surrounded by a scattering of smaller outbuildings. In the distance, herds of cattle moved like a slow, dark river across pastures that stretched to the edge of sight. "It's bigger than I thought," Elina said, her voice barely a whisper. "Took me 20 years, Elias replied, a note of quiet, weary pride in his voice. "Of course, it will all pass to strangers when I'm gone, seeing as Elia and we were not blessed with children." At his words, something flickered across Elina's face. A shadow, a memory, too quick to name, but she said nothing. As they pulled up to the main house, the front door opened and a woman stepped onto the porch, silhouetted against the warm lamplight from within. Elara Thorne was still a handsome woman at 38, with blonde hair showing only the first delicate threads of silver and a figure that hadn't yet surrendered to middle age. But a permanent tightness around her eyes spoke of a long and intimate acquaintance with disappointment. "Elias," she called, her voice carrying a note of gentle chiding. "You're later than I expected." He replied, climbing down from the wagon. He turned and offered a hand to Elina. "Elara, this is Elina Vance. She'll be helping around the house." Elara's eyes widened as she took in the girl's tattered state. A wave of emotion, pity, sorrow, and something fiercely protective washed over her features. "My lord, child," she breathed, coming down the steps. "You look as if you haven't seen a proper meal in a lifetime." "She probably hasn't," Elias said gruffly. "I figured she could take the small room off the kitchen." "Nonsense," Elara said, her voice suddenly brisk and full of purpose. "She'll have the spare bedroom upstairs. Come now, dear, let's get you cleaned and find you something to eat. As Elara led the girl inside, her movements full of a bustling energy Elias hadn't seen in years, he remained on the porch, a strange feeling settling in his chest. He thought his wife would be pleased, but this was something more. It was a desperate, hungry kind of kindness. Inside, the kitchen was a haven of warmth and comforting smells. Polished wood surfaces gleamed, and cheerful curtains framed the windows. Elara was already at the stove, heating water, her hands moving with a renewed grace. "Sit, Elina, such a pretty name," she chattered, a nervous energy propelling her words. "I had a sister named Elina once." Elina perched on the very edge of a sturdy wooden chair, her eyes taking in every detail of the room as if memorizing a dream. "It's very nice here, Mrs. Thorne." "Oh, call me Elara, dear. We're not formal people here." Elara placed a plate of bread, cheese, and cold meat in front of the girl. "Now, you eat. Eat until you're full while I prepare a bath for you." As Elina ate, cautiously at first, then with a growing ravenous hunger, Elara talked about the ranch, the seasons, the nearby town. But Elias, watching from the doorway, saw the slight tremor in his wife's hands and heard the brittle, fragile hope that underpinned her cheerful tone. It was the sound of a heart trying to mend itself. Chapter 3. A Fragile Beginning. The following weeks settled into a quiet rhythm, like a slow, deep breath after a lifetime of holding it. Elina was more than Elias could have hoped for. She rose before the sun, the soft sounds of her movements a new, gentle punctuation to the morning stillness. She helped Elara with the immense task of preparing breakfast for the ranch hands, her competence belying her years. The vegetable garden, which had begun to languish under Elara's sorrowful neglect, thrived under Elina's intuitive care. She could mend a tear in a shirt with stitches so fine they were nearly invisible, churn butter until it was the color of pale sunshine, and soothe a nervous horse with a soft word and a steady hand. But it was her effect on Elias that was the most profound transformation. His wife, who had been retreating into herself for years, slowly began to bloom again. She found purpose in teaching Elina the secret to her mother's apple pie, the art of arranging wildflowers in a pitcher, and even began reading aloud from novels in the evenings, her voice regaining a warmth and richness Elias had feared was lost forever. "She's a prodigy, that one," Elara said one evening as they sat on the porch, the air cool and smelling of rain-washed dust. They watched Elina in the distance, her slender form moving with easy confidence as she helped a ranch hand apply a poultice to a lame horse. "She learns everything before I've even finished explaining." "Perhaps too quickly," Elias murmured, a familiar unease stirring within him. "Sometimes I feel she is not 14, but 40, as if she's lived an entire life already." "She's had to grow up too fast, poor thing," Elara said, her voice fierce with a newfound maternal protectiveness. "But she is safe now. That is all that matters." Elias nodded, but the feeling lingered. Elina was a model of diligence, yet there were moments that pricked at his sense of calm. He would catch her standing at the edge of the property, her gaze fixed on the distant, hazy line of the horizon, her expression one of intense, unreadable calculation. Or he would notice the unnerving way she always seemed to know where everyone on the ranch was, her awareness a silent, invisible net cast over their small world. One crisp October evening, he found her in the hayloft of the barn after supper. She was sitting in the open loft door, her legs dangling in the space above the darkening earth, her silhouette framed by a sky awash of final, fiery embers of sunset. He climbed the ladder, the rungs groaning under his weight, and sat beside her. "A silver dollar for your thoughts," he said softly. She glanced at him, then back at the sky. "I was thinking about my parents," she said. Her voice was so low he had to strain to hear it. "The man at the auction said they died of fever." "They did, but that isn't the whole story. Before that, they had dreams. My father, He wanted to have his own farm, not a grand place like this, just a small patch of earth that was his. My mother, she wanted to learn to play the piano. She fell silent for a moment, the vastness of the twilight seeming to hold her words. I wonder if I'll ever be allowed to have dreams like that. What kind of dreams would you have? Elias asked, his curiosity piqued. She considered the question with a seriousness that was wholly adult. I think I would like to learn to read better, to read real books with stories and ideas, not just the good book and almanacs. And I'd like to learn about numbers, not just counting, but the kind of arithmetic that helps you understand important things. Elias was intrigued. What kind of important things? She looked at him then, her gaze direct and unblinking. Like, how much livestock a piece of land can truly support. How to know if you are making money or bleeding it away. How to plan for the lean years so they don't break you. Her voice dropped, holding a weight of bitter experience. How to make certain you never, ever have to sell your children. The words struck him with the force of a physical blow. In all his years, he had never spoken of the intricate finances of the ranch with anyone, not even Elias. It was a private, heavy burden. Yet this girl, barely a woman, had instinctively understood that this knowledge was the bedrock of survival, the very essence of power. I could teach you, he heard himself say, the words escaping before he had fully formed the thought. If you are truly interested? A light flared in her eyes, a spark of the fierce fire he had seen at the auction. You would? Reading, writing, the arithmetic of running a ranch? I would, but it would be on top of your other duties, not instead of them. I understand. And in that moment, a new, unspoken pact was forged between them. And so Elina's second education began. After the dishes were washed and the kitchen was quiet, she would join Elias in his study, a room that smelled of old leather, pipe smoke, and paper. He taught her from his own collection of books, and he guided her hand as she worked through columns of figures in his ledgers. She absorbed it all with a ferocious hunger that both amazed and unsettled him. As autumn bled into winter, Elias noticed changes not just in Elina, but in his wife as well. Elara's care for the girl began to border on obsession. She ordered new dresses from a catalog, spent hours brushing and braiding Elina's now lustrous hair, and tutored her relentlessly in what she called the manners of a proper young lady. Elina accepted this flood of attention with a quiet grace, but sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, Elias would see her catch her own reflection in a mirror, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and a strange, deep-seated sorrow. The girl in the mirror was becoming someone she didn't entirely recognize, and he wasn't sure if she considered that a blessing or a betrayal. Chapter 4. Shadows from the Past. The first true test arrived in November, carried on the back of a late-season storm that lashed the valley with 3 days of freezing, relentless rain. The ranch hands worked in a state of near exhaustion, their faces grim as they fought to move the cattle to shelter and secure the buildings against the punishing wind. Inside, Elara and Elina were a whirlwind of activity, keeping a constant supply of hot coffee and food flowing to the weary men. On the second night, a newer hand, a young man named Jedediah Jed Stone, with arrogant eyes and a cruel twist to his mouth, cornered Elina in the kitchen. "You're growing up real pretty," Jed said, his voice a low, suggestive drawl as he moved closer, trapping her between the stove and the dry sink. Elina took a step back, her spine pressing against the cool wood of the counter. "I think you should go back to the bunkhouse, Jed." "Not yet," he sneered, his confidence growing. "Come on now, don't be shy. I could show you some real fun." He reached for her. He never saw the cast-iron skillet. Elina's movement was a blur of pure instinctual self-preservation. The heavy pan connected with his temple with a sickening thud, dropping him to the kitchen floor like a felled tree. He wasn't unconscious, but a dazed, uncomprehending look filled his eyes. "I said," repeated,
Elina retalked, her voice deadly calm as she stood over him, the skillet still held at the ready. "What's going on in here?" Elias's voice cut through the charged air like a whip crack. He stood in the doorway, his gaze taking in the scene in a single sweeping glance. Jed scrambling on the floor, blood trickling from a cut on his head. Elina, her small frame radiating a terrifying stillness. The skillet held like a weapon. The quiet determination in her eyes told him everything he needed to know.
"Mr. Thorne," Jed began to bluster, "this girl, she attacked me. I was just—" "I know exactly what you were doing," Elias said, his voice dropping to a dangerously cold level. "Pack your things. You're off this ranch. Tonight." "But it's storming out there." "You should have thought of that before you decided to menace a child under the protection of my roof." Elias's hand rested on the handle of the revolver at his hip. "You have 10 minutes, then I'll drag you out myself." Jed stared from Elias's merciless face to Elina's, and finding no sanctuary in either, he stumbled out into the rainy darkness. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes," Elias replied to the empty doorway. "It is." He turned to Elina. "Are you all right?" She nodded, her knuckles white as she finally lowered the skillet. "I'm sorry for the trouble." "You have nothing to be sorry for. You defended yourself, and you showed more restraint than I would have." He studied her face, seeing past the child to the survivor beneath. "Where did you learn to handle yourself like that?" "Living on the streets teaches you things you'd rather not know," she said simply. Later that night, long after the house had fallen silent, Elara came to Elias's study. She sat heavily in the chair opposite his desk, her hands twisting in her lap. "We need to talk, Elias," she said. "We can't keep pretending she's just a hired girl." "What do you mean?" "Look at her. Truly look. She is becoming a beautiful young woman, and we are two childless people who have grown far too attached." Her voice broke. "What happens when she decides to leave us, Elias? What happens when some young man comes calling for her?" He had been pushing these same questions away for weeks. "She's only been here a few months, Elias. And in those few months, she has become the daughter we prayed for and never had. Don't you dare tell me you don't see it too." He couldn't deny it. "What are you suggesting?" "Let's make it official," she whispered, leaning forward, her eyes pleading. "We could adopt her, Elias. Give her our name. She has no family. This could be our chance, the answer to all our prayers." He understood her desperation, but a deep unease settled in him. "We would have to ask her first." "Of course, but think of it, Elias. She would have a real home, a family. She would inherit this ranch. Isn't that better than any future she could hope for on her own?" That night, sleep would not come. Elias lay awake, Elara's words echoing in the darkness. He had grown to love the girl, with her sharp mind and quiet strength. But was his wife's plan fair? Or was it just another cage, albeit a gilded one? 2 days later, Elina provided the answer herself. She was in the study, hunched over a ledger, when she suddenly looked up. "Mr. Thorne." "Yes, Elina." "Mrs. Thorne, she wants to adopt me, doesn't she?" His pen froze mid-stroke. "What makes you say that?" "Little things," she said, carefully closing the book. "The way she speaks of the future, the clothes, the way she introduces me to people." She looked at him, her gaze clear and direct. "She is a kind woman, and I am more grateful than I can say. But I need to tell you something. I wasn't entirely honest with you when we first met." Elias set down his pen. "Go on. My parents did die of fever. That was true. But I wasn't just living on the streets after." She took a deep breath. "I was working for a man named Caspian Rourke. He runs certain businesses in Port Alaron." Elias's blood ran cold. He knew the name. Rourke was a phantom, a man who controlled the city's darkest corners from the shadows. "What kind of work?" he asked, dreading the answer. "Nothing like what you're thinking," she said quickly. "I was too young.
But I kept his books, carried his messages. I was a ghost, good with numbers, and I could move through the city without being seen. Why are you telling me this now? Because Mrs. Thorne deserves to know who she is inviting into her family. And because, she hesitated, because I think someone has been watching the ranch. His hand moved instinctively toward his gun. What do you mean? Yesterday, in the garden, I saw a flash of light from the eastern hills, like a spyglass, and I found horse tracks down by the creek that don't belong to any of our animals. You think Rourke sent someone? Maybe, or maybe it's something else. But I learned a long time ago to trust the feeling on the back of my neck when it tells me I'm being hunted. Chapter 5. The Siege. The attack came 3 nights later, in the suffocating darkness just before dawn. It was Elina who heard it first. A light sleeper by necessity, she caught the faint, rhythmic drumming of approaching hooves. She slipped from her bed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, and peered through her window. 6 riders, moving fast and low in their saddles, were closing in on the ranch house. She didn't scream. She ran, her bare feet silent on the wooden floors, to Elias and Elara's room, her fist pounding on the door. "Mr. Thorne! Riders! Coming fast!" Elias was awake in an instant, his hand already reaching for the rifle he kept beside the bed. In the gray, pre-dawn light, they could see the riders spreading out, a pack of wolves encircling its prey. "Elina," Elias said, his voice calm and steady. "There's a shotgun in the kitchen pantry. Do you know how to use it?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Watch the back." As Elina moved to the kitchen, she risked a glance out a side window, and her blood turned to ice. In the growing light, she recognized the face of the lead rider. It was Jed Stone, and behind him were men whose faces she knew from the dark, dangerous alleys of Port Alaron. A shout cut through the morning air. "Thorne, send out the girl, and no one gets hurt." Elias's reply rang out, hard as iron. "You're trespassing on my land. Clear out while you still can." "This isn't about you, old man," Jed yelled back. "It's about the girl. She stole something that belongs to my employer." A chill of pure dread washed over Elina. Before leaving Port Alaron, in a moment of desperate foresight, she had taken something from Rourke. It was a small, unassuming ledger, but within its pages was a detailed record of every bribe and payment he had made to city officials. She had thought of it as her insurance policy. Now, it seems, the policy had been called due. The first shots exploded from the east, where 2 of Rourke's men tried to force their way into the barn. Ben Carter, Elias's loyal foreman, returned fire from the hayloft, and the attackers scrambled for cover. Glass shattered in the parlor. Elina crept toward the sound, the shotgun feeling solid and reassuring in her hands. One of Rourke's spogs was halfway through the window. Elina didn't hesitate. She fired. The blast echoed like a thunderclap inside the house, and the man tumbled backward with a scream. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, but was likely no more than 20 minutes. Finally, Jed's voice rose above the gunfire. "Thorne, I'm coming in. White flag. I want to talk." Elias agreed. Jed approached the porch, his hands raised. "This is simple, Thorne. Send out the girl, and we ride away." "What makes you think I'd turn over a child to scum like you?" "Because if you don't," Jed snarled, "we will burn this place to the ground." It was then that Elina stepped onto the porch, the shotgun held loosely in her arms. "There you are," Jed said, his eyes filled with a toxic mix of anger and desire. "You caused me a lot of trouble." "You caused your own," Elina replied, her voice unwavering. "What does Rourke really want?" "You know what he wants. That little book you took." Elias looked at her in surprise, but her eyes never left Jed's face. "And if I give it to him, then you're free. Rourke doesn't care about you. He just wants his property." Elina stood silent for a long moment. The ledger was her only shield against a man like Rourke. But now it was also a weapon pointed at the hearts of the only people who had ever shown her true kindness. "All right," she said finally, "but I want something in return." "You're not in a position to bargain, girl," Jed scoffed. "Aren't I?" Elina gestured to the ranch around them. "You're surrounded. Mr. Thorne's men are better shots, and they know every rock and tree in this valley. You might win, but it will cost you. Is a book worth that much blood? Jed's confidence wavered. What do you want? A guarantee, Elina said. I give you the book. You and your men ride away and never return. And you tell Caspian Rourke that I'm dead, killed in the fighting. What makes you think he'll believe that? A grim, cold smile touched Elina's lips. Because you're going to bring him a piece of my dress stained with my blood. Chapter 6. A Chosen Family.
In the weeks that followed the attack, life on the ranch settled into a new, more profound rhythm. The shared crisis had burned away all pretense, leaving behind the solid bedrock of their connection. One December evening, as the three of them sat before a crackling fire, Elara finally spoke the words that hung in the air between them. "Elina, dear," she began, her voice soft but firm, "we need to discuss your future." Elina looked up from one of Elias's books on cattle breeding. "We were wondering," Elara continued, glancing at Elias for support, "how you would feel about becoming a true member of this family." "You mean adoption?" Elina whispered. "If that is what you want," Elias said, his voice heavy with sincerity, "we want you to understand what it means. You would inherit this ranch. You would have a say in its future. But you would also have a responsibility to this land and to the people who work it." Elina closed her book. She looked from Elara's hopeful, tear-bright eyes to Elias's steady, earnest face. Over the past months, they had given her more than just food and shelter. They had given her a place to heal. "Can I ask you something first?" she said. "Why did you really buy me that day?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I saw something in your eyes that I recognized. A will to endure, no matter the cost. I respected it." "And I saw a child who deserved a chance at kindness," Elara added. "I wanted to help." A slow tear traced a path down Elina's cheek. "Then, yes," she breathed, "I would like that. But I want to earn my place. I want to learn everything. And," she paused, a new idea taking root, "I've been thinking about what happened. There are other children out there like me, trapped. Maybe we could help them too." The idea, born from her own pain, filled the room with a brilliant light. They talked late into the night, their quiet conversation weaving a new dream, a vision that would transform the Thorne Ranch from a cattle operation into something more, a sanctuary, a place of refuge and new beginnings. Chapter 7. The Years of Growth. 5 years later, in the vibrant spring of 1892, Elina Thorne stood on the front porch of the ranch house. At 19, she was a striking young woman, her face filled with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong. She watched a wagon approach, driven by Ben Carter. Beside him sat a thin, wary-looking boy of about 12. "More strays from the city?" asked Elias, joining her on the porch. He was grayer now, but his eyes held a warmth and contentment that had been absent 5 years ago. "The Children's Aid Society sent them," Elina replied. "The boy is Kyle, the girl is Anya, and the little one is Pip. All of them have lost everything." Over the past 5 years, they had welcomed 15 such children. Some stayed, becoming permanent members of their sprawling, unconventional family. Others moved on, equipped with skills, education, and the rare, precious knowledge that they were worthy of care. The ranch had prospered under Elias's sharp financial mind, and Elara, now surrounded by the chaotic, vibrant energy of children, looked younger and happier than Elias had ever seen her. Having children to care for had given her a purpose that years of failed pregnancies had denied her. As the wagon pulled up, Elina walked down to greet them. The boy, Kyle, looked at her with the same suspicious, calculating gaze she remembered seeing in her own reflection years ago. "You're Elina Thorne?"
he asked, his voice defiant. I am. And you must be Kyle. Maybe. Depends on what you want from me. Elina smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. Right now, I want you to come inside and get something to eat. After that, we'll talk. And if you decide you don't want to stay, then you don't have to. She led him toward the barn, where Liam, one of their first success stories, was now a master blacksmith. Been here 4 years, Liam told Kyle, not pausing in his work. Figured it was just another kind of trap. What changed your mind? Kyle asked. They kept their word, Liam said simply. About everything. They saved my life. Chapter 8. The Great Drought. The real test of everything they had built came in the summer of 1893. A brutal drought seized the land, baking the earth until it cracked and turning the lush pastures to brown, brittle straw. Ranchers across the state were facing ruin. Elias called a meeting of everyone on the ranch. I won't lie to you, he said, his voice grim as he addressed the large group gathered in the barn. This is the worst I've seen in 20 years. We're going to have to make hard choices. Will you have to send us away? Asked a 15-year-old girl named Sarah, her voice trembling. It was Elara who answered, her voice ringing with unshakable conviction. Absolutely not. This family sticks together, no matter what. In the months that followed, the ranch family united in a way that brought tears to Elias's eyes. The older children took on adult responsibilities without complaint. Kyle, the suspicious boy from the city, discovered a talent for divining and helped dig 2 new wells that saved a portion of the herd. It was Elias, however, who became their true leader. She negotiated with cattle buyers, stretched their dwindling finances with breathtaking precision, and moved among them all with a calm, unwavering strength that held their fear at bay. One sweltering August evening, as they sat exhausted on the porch, Elara took Elina's hand. When Elias first brought you home, she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears, I thought I wanted a daughter, but what I got was so much more. You have become the heart of this place, Elina. Elias cleared his throat. Your mother is right, and we think it's time to make it official. We want to make you a full partner in this ranch. Equal shares, equal decisions. Tears streamed down Elina's face as she looked at the 2 people who had not just saved her, but had allowed her to save them in return. Yes, she breathed, I would like that. But I want to earn my place. I want to learn everything. And, she paused, a new idea taking root, I've been thinking about what happened. There are other children out there like me, trapped. Maybe we could help them too. The idea, born from her own pain, filled the room with a brilliant light. They talked late into the night, their quiet conversation weaving a new dream, a vision that would transform the Thorne Ranch from a cattle operation into something more, a sanctuary, a place of refuge and new beginnings. Chapter 7. The Years of Growth. 5 years later, in the vibrant spring of 1892, Elina Thorne stood on the front porch of the ranch house. At 19, she was a striking young woman, her face filled with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong. She watched a wagon approach, driven by Ben Carter. Beside him sat a thin, wary-looking boy of about 12. More strays from the city? Asked, joining her on the porch. He was grayer now, but his eyes held a warmth and contentment that had been absent 5 years ago. The Children's Aid Society sent them, Elina replied. The boy is Kyle, the girl is Anya, and the little one is Pip. All of them have lost everything. Over the past 5 years, they had welcomed 15 such children. Some stayed, becoming permanent members of their sprawling, unconventional family. Others moved on, equipped with skills, education, and the rare, precious knowledge that they were worthy of care. The ranch had prospered under Elias's sharp financial mind, and Elara, now surrounded by the chaotic, vibrant energy of children, looked younger and happier than Elias had ever seen her. Having children to care for had given her a purpose that years of failed pregnancies had denied her. As the wagon pulled up, Elina walked down to greet them. The boy, Kyle, looked at her with the same suspicious, calculating gaze she remembered seeing in her own reflection years ago. "You're Elina Thorne?" he asked, his voice defiant. "I am. And you must be Kyle." "Maybe. Depends on what you want from me." Elina smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. "Right now, I want you to come inside and get something to eat. After that, we'll talk. And if you decide you don't want to stay, then you don't have to." She led him toward the barn, where Liam, one of their first success stories, was now a master blacksmith. "Been here 4 years," Liam told Kyle, not pausing in his work. "Figured it was just another kind of trap." "What changed your mind?" Kyle asked. "They kept their word," Liam said simply. "About everything. They saved my life." Chapter 8. The Great Drought. The real test of everything they had built came in the summer of 1893. A brutal drought seized the land, baking the earth until it cracked and turning the lush pastures to brown, brittle straw.